Welcome to the eighth and the last class of the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras called the Samadhi Padaha, the chapter on Samadhi. As I had mentioned at the beginning of every class, this um, chapter presents an overview of yoga all the way to the highest states of Samadhi for the advanced student, so that the advanced student doesn't have to read the rest of the Yoga Sutras. So that seems to be the style used in the Yoga Sutras. Okay, with that, I'm going to recap the various classifications of samadhi that we've seen in the last and the previous classes. Okay, so let's go to, all right. So remember, there is what is Patanjali classifies the samadhis in the following ways. Okay, pay close attention because you will see a logical reasoning why he does it in this way. Now, he calls the one of the highest form of classification as sampragnata and asampragnata. Sampragna means cognition, wisdom. So it involves knowledge, cognition, wisdom, words, sounds, all that. And asampragnata is the very high state where there is no object of focus. The mind is able to rest on its own. Normally, we need something to latch onto, otherwise, the mind can drift away. It is so unruly. And asampragnata is the highest level. And what I want you to take away from this, the sampragnata samadhi, all of us would have experienced these states in one form or the other, whether you are just sitting still or you are meditating, but you would have experienced it. In fact, the Buddha, when he was a young boy, he was witnessing the fall harvest festival. He was sitting on the top of a hill under a rose apple tree, and he was leaning against the tree, and he was witnessing this beautiful scene. The sun is setting and the fall harvest was going on. And at that point, he closed his eyes. The image of the sun and the entire field was in his mind, and he went into the first jhana. So, as I said, the sequence is pretty much similar in yoga as well as in Buddhism. So, the first thing that you latch on to, the mind focuses on, is a gross object. Okay. Then, or after staying there for some time, it goes on to the subtle object, which is the smell or just the warmth. You feel the warmth, even though you're actually, there's no warmth, but you're kind of feeling it. So in that example, the Buddha just entered the first jhana, that is the vitarka, the gross perceptibles. And but once you are in that state for some time and you put in some effort, then you go into the vichara samadhi, which is the meditation samadhi on a subtle object like the smell, taste. Even though the smell is not there, but it seems to you, the memory of the object brings the smell or the warmth or the taste. So this logical sequence, probably you would understand: gross, subtle, right? Now, then comes the interesting part. After you are on the subtle object for some time, apparently a lot of joy comes. And you might have experienced this in some form or the other. This is called joy, not out of the senses, non-sensual joy. That is, nothing stimulates you from outside, but you get into the states of rapture. So I can only explain from my experience. It seems like it's bubbling up. It comes and it just bubbles. My meditation teacher would say, it's just the whole thing. You have to go through this purging and this to get into the next state, which is called sasmita. So vitarka, vichara, in Buddhism, this sa ananda means with bliss. It is called priti or pitti, which means rapture, joy. And then sasmita, it is sa asmita, means with I-ness. You're just being yourself. It is I that is stripped of everything else. I am a man, woman, all that is stripped. You're just being, watching your existence. There's nothing else. On the mind, the only thing is there is the existence. So this is a feeling of quietness. In Buddhism, it's called ekagrata. So ekagrata is the last state. So this is how sampragnata samadhis are classified. And the takeaway point is that I'm most people would have experienced this in one form or the other. That is when you feel this joy, not from other senses, but just the feeling itself. It is from this. So it is not something which is very difficult to achieve. Whereas the second one, the asampragnata, that is a little more difficult because there is no object of focus, and that needs the mind to have achieved a state of para vairagyam, great dispassion, great detachment to things. Okay. Now, I wanted to point out one more thing here. So, if you look at these four things, Ananda is bliss, and it refers to the instrument. The bliss is what you experience in the mind. It refers to the instrument of perception, which is the mind. Sa Asmita refers to the knower. And the first two are objects: gross object, subtle object. So, in any cognition process, as we've seen before, let me go to that page. So, remember, or let me go to 178. Okay. We saw the example of a crystal, right? Sheena vritter abhijatasya mane grahitri grahana grahyeshu tatsta tadanjanata samapattihi. So Patanjali says the mind can take on the three, the either the object of knowledge, what is focusing on, it can take the form of that, just like a crystal takes the form of whatever is nearby. So the mind can take the form of the object. The mind can completely get engrossed, so much so that you lose your own identity. Subject, swarupa shunyam eva. That is, you lose your identity and you're so merged with the object. So that could be the object or the instrument of knowing. This is the mind. That is the pleasure in the mind and the knower. Okay, so these three are the ones that Patanjali is talking about. So if you see here, Vitarkan Vichara are the objects. Sa Ananda is instrument of cognition and the feeling felt therein. And Sa Asmita is the knower, the ego or the I sense. So this is what Patanjali describes in the sutra. Sheena vrittir abhijatasya mane, like a crystal, unblemished crystal taking on the color of a clock that is next to it. The mind gets totally submerged in one of these three entities, because these three are what are involved in the knowing process: the knower, the instrument of knowing, and the object of knowledge. Okay, so that is what Patanjali is saying. And then the other form of, okay, before that, let me go into nirvitarka and nirvichara. I asked you why this nirvitarka and nirvichara are such a big deal. It is a very big deal. Why this distinction? Patanjali seems to be classifying everything. Why is he so obsessed about classification? Why even this vitarka, the gross object, he is classifying as one, including words, all that, and nirvitarka means the meditation on a subtle object without the use of words. It is a big deal according to Patanjali because it refers to the transition from conceptual thinking to direct perception. And that is why he says smriti parishuddha. He uses the word smriti parishuddha when the Okay, so let's see where. When the memory is purified of words, meanings, and sounds, the mind appears to lose its sense of ego or I-ness, and only the object of contemplation remains illuminated. This is Nirvitarka Samapatti. So this is because of the latent impressions. We all the latent impressions are what's called the karma pala, that it's stored, and when the right conditions come, it manifests. So even a thought that you have, I wish I had that car, that gets stored as an impression. And when the right time comes, when you go, when you have some money, and you could be spending it on other things, but you see the car, you want to spend on this because it's an impression. Then when the time and conditions are right, it manifests. So that is the reason the latent impressions has to be cleansed. That is why Patanjali is saying you are seeing everything through the cloud of a lens, the foggy lens. So Nirvitarka is seeing it through a clean lens. So that is the distinction. Okay. So far, are these classifications clear? So I told about two types of classifications: Sampragnata, Asampragnata. I've not come to Asampragnata yet. I've told it before, but now I've not told it. Then even inside this, I've told about the three. Any knowing requires three things: knower, object of knowledge, instrument of knowledge, and these Sampragnata Samādhis, they all fall into this category. And then Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara. Gross object with words, gross object without words, and similarly, subtle object with and without words. Now comes the other form of Samadhi, the highest form without a seed. Okay, so that we will see again. So I've defined this, but I want to tie everything together. Asampragnata Samadhi, Virama Pratyaya Abhyasa Purva Samskara Sheshonyaha. Asampragnata Samadhi is the other kind of Samadhi which arises through the practice of Paravairagyam, great detachment, which brings about the disappearance of the mind, wherein only the latent impressions remain, but rendered dormant like fried seeds. In this state, you don't even have an object of focus. It is obtained through para vairagyam, great dispassion. So the term virama pratyaya, so I told you that Yoga Sutras is like a scientific document. So the virama pratyaya means a technical term. And Vyasa explains this. It is the virama pratyaya literally means the cessation of the mental object, or the movie theater of the screen that's constantly being played, that ceases. There's no contents there. So, and how can this go away? Because all these contents are produced by the impressions. When all those impressions are rendered dormant, so they don't fructify, then it's you don't have this movie theater going on when you meditate. Okay, so it is through practice of para vairagya, abhyasa purvaha, and he doesn't explain what this abhyasa is. This is practice of para vairagya, and that is great detachment. Okay, so that is all the contents we've seen.